Let's play a game. Imagine your family trying to buy a minivan, and it takes 12 years, 14 signatures, 3 congressional hearings, and by the time it shows up in the driveway, it doesn't have Bluetooth and only plays CDs. That's roughly how the Department of War has bought stuff for a very long time. Welcome back to the Fulcrum Lab podcast, where we talk intelligence, strategy, leadership, and discernment, and occasionally explain why your tax dollars take the scenic route before they turn into actual equipment. In a previous life, I wrote a paper about why the Air Force and the Pentagon struggle so much with innovation. Today, I want to revisit that argument, translate it out of Pentagonese, and then look at what's changed since 2015 that might give us a little hope. So if you've ever had a good idea die in the process, or you've wondered why the world can ship you a new phone in 2 days, but the military needs a geological timeline to buy a radio, this episode is for you. Back when I wrote that paper, my basic point was this: big bureaucracies are like seatbelts and parking brakes. They keep you from doing something wildly dumb at high speed, which is good when you're dealing with nuclear weapons and wars. But if you never take the parking brake off, you're not safe. You're just stuck in the driveway. So yes, the military bureaucracy can be useful. It slows things down. It makes you follow checklists. It keeps one hot-headed colonel from wrecking everything on a Tuesday afternoon. That's the upside. The downside is that the same system that protects you from bad decisions also makes it hard to make new decisions. It hates change. It treats new ideas like suspicious packages. And it often wears a big "We Love Innovation" t-shirt while quietly moving the "No" stamp around the building. In my paper, I told a story that's almost too on the nose. 2 airmen at Andrews realized the Air Force was paying for a fancy luxury car just to drive VIPs around base. They said, "Hey, why don't we just use normal sedans and save some money?" Logical, sensible, no-brainer. They got told no, then no again. So they kept pushing up and up the chain until it got to the Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force, who finally said, "Yes, obviously, stop leasing the fancy, expensive car." It's a great story of persistence and airmen leading from below. It's also insane that your idea must go to the number 2 person in the entire service just to stop renting the Mercedes. That's what resistance to change looks like in real life. I also talked about culture. On paper, the chiefs were giving speeches about debate and creativity. We should be an Air Force that loves new ideas. Innovation is in our DNA. Good words. At the same time, if you looked around, the people getting rewarded were often the ones who kept things smooth, quiet, and familiar, not the ones who asked hard questions or tried weird experiments. You could feel the gap between what leaders said and what they encouraged. That gap matters. When you tell people, "We want you to take smart risks," but then you only promote the folks who never rock the boat, the smart ones get the message. Keep your head down. After a while, the people who are naturally creative either stop trying or go somewhere else. I also picked on how we program money and bought things. Without diving into alphabet soup, the short version is this. The budgeting and buying system was built decades ago for big, slow projects, like bombers and ships, that took 10 to 20 years to design and build. You decide what you want, you lock it in, you march through a long checklist. That kind of system is terrible at anything that changes fast, like software, drones, or most of what we need now to keep up with smart enemies. So that was my 2015 rant. The culture talks innovation, but punishes it. The money system is slow and rigid. And the whole thing cares more about protecting the way we've always done things than about adapting to new realities. What's changed since then? Let's start with the good news. The Pentagon basically admitted, our one giant slow process for buying everything is not cutting it, and created something new called the Adaptive Acquisition Framework. Ignore the name. The idea is simple. Instead of one big process, there are now several different lanes depending on what you're buying. One of those lanes is specifically for going faster. It's called the middle tier pathway. But think of it as the don't wait a decade lane. You use it when you want to build and field something in about 2 to 5 years instead of 10 to 15. You build early versions, test them with real users, fix what's broken, and then field more. It's more try this and improve it than design the perfect thing on paper and pray. Another lane is for software. This is huge. In the old days, software was treated like a tank. You write a massive requirement, hire a big contractor, and hope that after many years they deliver something that still works. These new software rules say, no, build it in small pieces, get feedback all the time, update constantly, and don't pretend you're done. The department has even said this should be the default way to do software now. At the same time, the military has started stealing some tricks from the startup world. Instead of 100-page legal documents, you see problem statements and pitch days, where companies come in, present their ideas, and walk out with contracts on the spot. The Air Force and Space Force have been using AFWorks and SpaceWorks to run these kind of events, pushing money to small companies with interesting tech. There are now real examples of the Air Force awarding dozens of contracts in a day. That would have sounded like science fiction in 2015. At the bigger picture level, there's also something called Replicator. Again, forget the branding. The idea is to get thousands of relatively cheap smart systems, drones and similar things, into the field in a year or two, not over a decade. It's meant to shock the system and to proving we can move fast at scale, not just in special cases. Then there's the money side, that creaky old planning and budgeting process I complained about. Congress set up a commission to examine it, and in 2024, they came back and said, in polite government language, yeah, this is not working for the world we live in now. They recommended changes to make it easier to move money faster and connect budgets more directly to what the strategy says we need, instead of letting the budget drive the strategy by default. So, have we fixed everything? No. But compared to 2015, you can't honestly say nothing has changed. We now have more ways to buy things faster, better ways to do software, more on-ramps for small companies, and at least a recognition that our budgeting process needs major surgery. Where does that leave my original critique? The part about tools and processes is less true than it used to be. Back then, it was fair to say we literally don't have a good way to buy this kind of thing. Now, in many cases, we do have a path. We just don't always use it. Program offices can choose the fast lane, but sometimes still choose the old lane because that's what they know. Leaders can use flexible contracts, but sometimes default back to the long, safe-feeling ones. That part about culture incentives, though, that's still very real. You can give an organization all the new lanes and tools you want, but if people are still rewarded mostly for not making waves, those tools won't change much. If your promotion system still favors never made a mistake over tried new things and learned, you will not get much innovation, no matter how many pitch days or special programs you stand up. The encouraging thing is that there are now visible counterexamples. You can point to specific officers, civilians, and teams who used AFWorks, or the software pathway, or the fast lanes, and put working things in the field sooner. You can point to Space Force units buying commercial space services in a more modern way. These are no longer just PowerPoint dreams, they're real. So if you're listening from inside the system, what do you do with this? First, simplify the way you think about it. Don't get lost in all the acronyms. Ask 3 plain English questions. 1. What problem are we really trying to solve? Not what program do we want to protect, but what do we need to be able to do in the real world? That was a big theme in my old paper. Stop fighting over old labels and start talking about actual effects you're trying to create. 2. Is there a faster or more flexible path we could use to get there now? In 2015, the answer was often no. In 2026, the answer is yes, more often than we admit. Whether that's a fast acquisition lane, a software-first approach, or a commercial service we can buy instead of building from scratch. 3. What behavior are we actually rewarding? Do the people who take thoughtful risks and learn from them get good assignments, praise, and resources? Or do they get quietly sidelined while the safest hands get all the love? No process can save you from bad incentives. If you ask that question honestly in your corner of the world and then change your behavior based on the answer, you're doing more for innovation than any memo. For everyone else, the casual listener who doesn't live in the Pentagon, the translation is this: big organizations are slow, not just because they're big, but because they're wired to fear being wrong more than they're wired to desire being better. That's true in government and companies, and sometimes in our own lives. The trick is not to blow up every rule, but to figure out where the brakes are helping and where you've been sitting in the driveway with the engine running for 10 years. The hopeful part of this story is that the department has started to take its foot off the brake in some areas. We're not doing donuts in the parking lot yet, but compared to 2015, we've at least moved the gear shift out of park. This is the Fulcrum Lab Podcast. My challenge this week is simple. Think about one place in your own world, work, family, church, whatever, where you keep saying, we should do things differently, but you're still following the same old routine. Ask yourself those same 3 questions. What problem are we really solving? Is there a more flexible way to do it now? And what are we rewarding? If the honest answers make you a little uncomfortable, congratulations. You've just found your personal version of the Pentagon bureaucracy.